and I will pass it along to Dennis Falloon for introduction.
Good morning. I want to welcome all those that participated in the first series of the District 7 Safety Academy webinars, and also want to welcome all those that are new. My name is Dennis Falloon, and I am the District 7 Safety Academy Coordinator and a District 7 consultant working with the District Safety Office. Today, we're going to begin our second series, and Joe Santos, who is the state safety engineer who's based up in Tallahassee, Florida, will present a webinar titled The Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP. Before he begins, I'm just going to give you a brief intro to the Academy, and then if you have any questions, that's fine. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Joe. If you'll bear with me, here we go. So this Academy has been set up for the local agencies, the District 7 Local Agency Traffic Safety Academy. And its purpose, or what is it? It's a series of webinar topics offered to District 7 local agencies and others throughout the state. These webinars provide information regarding safety-related issues to enhance local safety programs. The second series begins today. They start at 10 o'clock and will end around noon. And the reason for the 2-hour time frame is some may be shorter, on the shorter end toward an hour, and some might need to be toward the second hour because it might be more of a complex topic. But usually they run about an hour and 15 minutes. The second series, this series of webinars will end on December 10th. 2014, and all the webinars are on a Wednesday. If you want to register for the seminar, you can register for all of them or one at a time if that's your preference. There's the link, register to go to District 7 Safety Academy 2. And also, this will be modified for the next webinar because in the process of changing the webpage link. But right now you can go to district7safetysummit.org to also go in and get information too. And then all of these presentations are saved as PDF in PDF format and are recorded, and you can go to this link that's posted there, and it's also on your notice that you got to participate today, that link. You can see the previous presentations and you can go in and listen to them. This is the listing of all of the topics that will be covered from today through December 10th. I am in the works of trying to resolve the issue of PDHs. Unfortunately, won't have it set up for this one today, but there's enough time frame between each one of these now that I should be able to get that into place. And if you have any further information regarding this academy, you can please contact me at your convenience. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Joe Santos.
All right. Thank you, Dennis.
Okay.
All right.
Bringing it up.
Very good. Well, Anthony mentioned about the Safety Summit, meeting some of you there. I apologize. I was not there. I had a conflict, but as I told Anthony and Dennis and the rest of the staff there that I was there in spirit. So thank you for all your support in making this program happen. We need everybody engaged, and through the use of the Safety Academy, I believe that extremely is a great tool to get everybody engaged. My name is Joe Santos. I'm the state safety engineer here in Tallahassee. I've been in this role for 8 years, been with the department for 20 years, and my main responsibility here is to manage the Highway Safety Improvement Program. So other efforts that I do are really focused on the data to support the project. So we're going to speak a little bit to that today and go from there. Now, I do not anticipate using a full hour, but I do want to be sure that I am completely covering the topic, so we've got plenty of time for any type of questions and such. So with that, we'll get started. Oops. Very good. So what I'd like to do in this presentation is just first kind of create the urgency using some of the Florida statistics. So I'm going to speak primarily, fatality numbers, but I'm gonna take a little different twist on things, kind of make you all aware of just how traffic safety fits into other areas throughout the state. Then I'm gonna spend a little time on the Highway Safety Improvement Program, a little overview. I'm gonna be really focused both on the federal guidance that's out there, and so on each of the slides that I'll have references on, that I would encourage you, if you want more details, to kind of go to those links and such. So, but I'll be speaking to both the federal and the state level, and then lastly, the item that brings it all together is our strategic highway safety plan. So I'll speak a little bit to that. All right, creating the urgency. Well, this first slide here kind of brings up the fatality rates and how Florida compares to the rest of the U.S. And before I get too involved on this one, I do want to mention that as a state, that we are unique in many ways. And one particular way is that our population level. Our population level is right up there with New York, the state of New York, and we only have two other states with more than us, and that is Texas and California. So we are at somewhat of a disadvantage when we start looking at just the fatality rates. But the other takeaway from this slide, though, is that we've seen a steady trend over the years, that our rates have been steadily declining, which is good. But the reality of it, though, is that we have more than 33,000 fatalities in the U.S. and in Florida more than 2,400. So pretty substantial number of fatalities, and so these numbers are looking at fatalities occurring on roadways for both the state maintained and local roads. So it's really important that we look at the data to support where we need to focus our efforts, both on the state and local roads. So that first slide was pretty much showing U.S. and Florida, but another slide, and I've shared this with other groups in the past, is basically how does, when we start talking about traffic-related injuries and such, how does that really relate to any other types of causes of injury and death? So that first bullet there is asking that question. How does motor vehicle traffic injury deaths compare with other types of injury deaths? Unfortunately, we do have these different types of deaths occurring throughout the state, and some of them do get media attention. But to really understand how much traffic relates to these, it's kind of interesting to ask the question. So this information is from our Department of Health partner. But to answer that first question, basically in 2011, which is the most recent table that I could find that had this information, that the motor vehicle traffic was number 2 with 2,367 deaths in 2011 as compared to a little over 3,000 on poisoning. I've been asked, why those numbers why is poisoning so high? And I guess the reality of it is that we've just got poisonings would take into account also any relationship to drug overdoses and such. So there has been a national epidemic here with poisoning, and not just in Florida, but just poisoning overall and with drugs and such. So the other part, so that was one takeaway overall. The other takeaway was basically looking at, on this slide, on the motor vehicle traffic, we do have some age groups where motor vehicle traffic is number one in regards to the leading causes of injury death. So between that 5 and 24 age bracket, number one. And so it's just kind of a slide here just to kind of make you more aware of how traffic-related injuries and deaths tie in with other deaths that occur throughout the state. And then the next slide speaks to the top portion of this slide is speaking to the just one I just showed you, those top three causes of injury, death by age group. But then the bottom one here talks about the non-fatal injury where folks have been hospitalized and breaking it down by age group. And motor vehicle traffic, even for injuries, is number 3, below poisoning, and then with falls. And the big reason on the falls is with the 65 age plus, falls is the number 1. So just some general information to kind of create that urgency when it comes down to addressing motor vehicle traffic. All right. So that's the one part. Going back to traffic fatalities, this particular slide is from a website called saferoadmaps.org. It's kind of a neat tool, and what they do with saferoadmaps.org site is basically use traffic fatality information nationally and develop these neat web tools that you can use. So this is one example. Basically, this is just showing a Florida map with the heat clusters of where the fatalities are occurring. So it kind of tells a story that here, where the color is the brightest, really is where there's the more intensity or density of where the traffic fatalities are occurring. And it's pretty clear in here your urban areas are going to have the higher numbers. Now, typically on the data side, we would look at multiple years, but even though this app is just showing 1 year, the trend is pretty consistent throughout the state over multiple years that the higher intensity of crashes is in our urban areas. Then the next part, kind of zooming into the Tampa-St. Pete area, that's the same kind of map zoomed in, and you can still kind of get a feel for the cluster. And then if you take away that visual component and just kind of see where the crashes are occurring, it's basically they're pretty hard to really determine at this level, where the high crash segments intersections are. But you can kind of see urban areas very dense and the rural areas sparse. So different stories there. So that was just a little backdrop on the data side, and I know on our future workshops that there will be time to talk about data. I know on July 30th there'll be a webinar on the crash data collection and analysis, or using the CMDS application. So that's another tool in your toolbox to help with that data to help support the solution. All right, so I'm going to move ahead into the Highway Safety Improvement Program overview, the federal and state level. Really, it's kind of important right from the get-go to talk about the purpose of the program. The reality of it is that we do not have enough funds realistically to go out there and capture each and every safety concern, whether that be a subjective or a data-driven. So we have to be very we have to have a process in place to really define where we're going to focus our efforts, and this program purpose helps start that process. So it's really important that we understand that we are focusing on the program to reduce traffic fatalities. And so those earlier slides just kind of focus on the fatalities, but also on where the serious injuries are occurring on all public roads. So just to be clear, all public roads would be both the state and non-state owned public roads. So that's the first part. It's very needs to be understood about the program purpose. The second part really is that it needs to be data driven, and that we need to be strategic in our approach to addressing highway safety on all public roads. And at the end, I've got a slide here that will speak to the reporting, but annually we submit a report to basically track the program's performance. And that performance is to basically reduce those traffic fatalities and serious injuries. And then I've got the reference statutory citations to reference there. And then basically the website, right where the FHWA, Federal Highway Administration website, where this guidance is from. So that's the program purpose. Now, the other part is, so what can I do, or what's the eligible use of the funding? Language makes it very broad. So it's basically any strategy or activity or project basically that ties in with our data-driven strategic highway safety plan. And that's the first part. The other part is that we need to have our best approximation on how it's going to correct or improve the hazard road location or a specific feature or the safety problem. And there's some guidance in the Moving Ahead for Progress 21st Century Authorization, which is MAP 21, has some more language in regards to example list of eligible activities. With the program, the federal guidance is just basically painting a very broad picture. It's up to the states on how they then implement these specific activities to address these data-driven safety concerns. There is language in there too that speaks to workforce development, training and such, and education activities that you can use the Highway Safety Improvement Program funds for. So moving ahead to the program features, the big one, and I have to reiterate this, is that it needs to be data-driven, and that needs to tie into our emphasis areas of our strategic highway safety plan. When I speak to data-driven, many times I hear questions, well, what kind of data are we talking about? Well, crash data is one of the primary ones, but there is other data that we can look at to help support where there could be a safety concern, and much of this involves more of a risk assessment or input from our enforcement folks. So there might be challenges sometimes where you might not have crash data to support, but we can work through on a case-by-case basis to really see what other data is available to support the need for the project. The other part on the Strategic Highway Safety Plan is that there are a lot of different stakeholders that are working with the state DOT in addressing safety. The earlier slides that I had shown with you about the top 10 injury-related fatalities, that data was from one of our partners, or from the Department of Health. So we've got a lot of other partners, including enforcement and education folks that are helping us to address our plan, our strategic highway safety plan. The DOT is kind of helping, kind of like is in the background and forefront with kind of leading the effort, but it's not just a DOT plan. Just want to make that clear that this plan really does involve local agencies, and stakeholders like each of you that are on the line today. The other important part, and once again, on the data-driven side, is that part of the requirements on the Highway Safety Improvement Program was basically for the states to have a statewide data system to really determine where these problem identification and also having the ability to track the performance of specific type of countermeasures you put in place. So we do have a system that accounts for that for both the high crash locations and also an evaluation tool for determining how your countermeasures are affecting both the fatal and serious injury crashes. All right, moving on to reporting. As I mentioned earlier, we are required as part of this federal program to submit an annual report to the DOT Secretary on how we're, how we are programming the funds and how well those projects are performing and tracking their effectiveness in reducing the fatals and serious injury crashes. And in this last year, we've been submitting them electronically. FHWA has developed a website for all the states to go to, and they populate specific fields and such for input. But this last year was the first year where they've actually been able to do a consistent report for all the states throughout the U.S. So that's pretty neat. There's like a one consistent reporting mechanism which did not exist in the past. So those reports are all published, and I have the link there on the website that you can visit to look at the report. All right, so basically that's the federal side, just kind of talking about the high level, the objectives of the program and the reporting and such. And so what I'd like to do now is just spend a little bit of time and talk about, on the state level, the Highway Safety Improvement Program. And the primary reference I'm going to use here is from our work program instructions. And I have the reference there at the bottom. So the guidance that we give on the use of HSP fund or Highway Safety Improvement Program funding is that it needs to meet one or more of the following requirements. And the first part is one, it addresses a key highway safety program from our Florida Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Talked about that quite a bit already. And that there is what we call a net present value greater than zero. And I have a reference to a note below for those folks that the net present value is a new term, maybe a new term. Really, it kind of boils down to the using the values you get from doing your benefit cost ratio. I've abbreviated the formula substantially here, but generally concept is basically just subtracting your annualized cost, your annualized benefit minus your annualized cost. So I've just abbreviated that there. So that's the first part. You've got you're addressing a safety problem from our Florida Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and you got an net present value greater than zero. One, or you determined that based on our high hazard location list, we have a high crash segment intersection list, that you've determined it to be on that list, and from your proposed countermeasure that you've developed a net present value greater than zero. The beauty of net present value is that you can then use that value to help prioritize for your funding. Another area we have is this called our skid hazard elimination program. And once again, net present value greater than 0 or friction number 25 or less. Installation of paved shoulders or other run-off-the-road crash mitigation measures on rural highways. Once again, NPV greater than 0. And elimination or mitigation of roadside obstacles. So that's the guidance, high level. There is a little bit more language in the chapter 31 of the safety work program instructions, but high level and specific for this presentation, this is probably the meat of the information that's in that chapter. All right. So let me spend a few minutes on about overviewing our Florida Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Now, I have done, this is our second round of the presentations on the this is our second round of the workshop series. The first workshop series, I had already done a more extensive Florida Strategic Highway Safety Plan overview, and Anthony or Dennis, is that presentation one that if somebody wanted to look at, they could? Is it recorded? I'm not sure, but
I believe it is.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to do a high level, and if there's if you need more information, I have the link to the plan, or you can, if it's posted on the website here from the first round of the workshop series, you can listen to that there.
Joe, excuse me for interrupting. It is out there. So.
It's out there. Okay. All right. I just wanted to. I should check that before the presentation. Thank you for that follow-up, Dennis. All right. So on the Florida Strategic Highway Safety Plan, the vision, mission, and goal. Vision, safer surface transportation system for basically all road users. Mission, using all the E's, using engineering, enforcement, education, and emergency response. Help us to team up, one, and then help focus our limited resources for the best opportunities. With the ultimate goal of reaching 0, but over time having a 5% reduction in what we're calling a rolling 5-year average of fatalities and serious injuries. Very good. Then the other part of this is basically understanding what the emphasis areas are. So the engineering, the primary engineering ones are the intersection crashes and our lane departure crashes. We have been, as an agency, been working very adamantly on our vulnerable road users, our pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists. So, but to each of these, there is an education and enforcement component on aggressive driving, intersection, our vulnerable road users, which would include pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists, lane departure crashes, impaired driving, our at-risk drivers, which include both the aging road users, those 65 and older, and our teen drivers, distracted driving, and then another emphasis area that's a component of this is our traffic data. So a little overview, what we talked about. We spoke a bit about our creating that urgency. So I hope that if you weren't already aware of our numbers as a Florida go with traffic fatalities, both crashes and hospitalizations, that you're aware of those now with our Florida statistics. Covered briefly the Highway Safety Improvement Program overview, from both the federal and the state level, and then just touch base and give you all an update and an overview of our strategic highway safety plan. So that concludes my presentation.
This is Dennis Flynn. Joe, I have a question. If you could possibly share this with everybody,
Sure.
Can you explain or kind of give an overview of the allocation to the districts? Because I think some folks believe that why isn't there more money, or is there a bigger pot or whatever? But it is allocated. You get the funds in for safety related projects, but it's allocated out to the districts by a need based, right?
Yeah, and this just so I'm understanding the question correctly, and I want to package it up the right way. Who is asking the question?
Some of the locals.
Locals. Okay. All right. All right. The way right now, the way the funds are allocated is basically based on need. And I've been, or excuse me, the safety office has been managing the allocation of the HSIP funds since 2009. The first time that we had funds, safety funds, was going back to 2006 under Safety Lou, and at that time, the safety funds were basically just allocated to the districts based on statutory formula, which is basically a formula that they use to allocate the funds based on lane miles to the districts. The situation we were in was that the funds were not being spent. So the decision was made that the funds would be centrally managed here in Tallahassee through the safety office. Now, since 2009, we've been managing the funds purely based on requests for projects from each of the districts. And we have been able to spend the majority of funds for projects. In fact, this last year, when I received requests for funds, that I had to limit the requests because I had requests in excess of the funds that I had available. So prior to 2013, I was basically able to fund all requests that districts submitted. Now I am unable to do that. So the need to now basically use mechanisms to prioritize the projects based on the net present value and to look at where there are needs throughout the state is how we will allocate funds. Now, the other part of this story is basically the how you define the need is very dynamic, because you could have a district or jurisdiction could have a need today for a project, but find that there's a downward trend in the numbers and may not have a need the next round. So the need is very dynamic, but we have to look at defining the need based on the traffic fatalities and the serious injuries. So I hope that explanation helped. I gave a little bit of history there, but I thought it was important to kind of set the stage.
Thank you.
There is a question in the chat regarding aggressive driving crashes, Joe.
Yes.
It is, how do we determine crashes that involve aggressive driving and distracted driving?
Aggressive driving and is one. When it comes down to data-driven, we have to look at what available data we have from our crash data and our enforcement folks. So we would look at both citation information, or whether or not how aggressive driving was annotated on a crash report. So those are two methods that come to mind right now. I know that we have coalitions that help focus on those efforts, so I would have to lean towards more on the behavior side and how they are managing through dealing with aggressive driving. It's one of those that I'm per se not the subject matter expert on, but I can get with the folks that manage the behavior grants to determine how they focus where they do their efforts for aggressive driving. Hope that helps.
And if I can add to that, Joe, what we've done in the past to identify those with data-driven solutions,
right,
based on the definitions from the Highway Safety Improvement Program, is just to use the contributing cost field.
Yes.
That's the field that is most useful in the crash data itself to identify those. So I have the number of fields here, but not that.
Yes.
So anything that's a contributing cause, 5, 10, 12, 15, 11, 13, or 17 is an aggressive driving crash. I can look up the word definitions of those if you'd like.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony.
For the CDMS users, I mean that's just a flag in the aggressive driving. That is how the flag is defined.
Right.
Yeah, Mike, I can summarize that and send that out to you.
Am I able to see the questions, Anthony? When
they are in the chat.
Oh, there they are. Okay. Okay, I apologize. That screen was closed on my side.
Sure.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I see Mike's question now. Yep.
If anybody has any other questions, please type them in the chat.
And my contact information is up there, so feel free to you can contact me, but I would encourage you to reach out to Anthony, the champions, including Dennis there also. So I just just to kind of maintain continuity and such, but. Is there any education materials out there on Sheros? I can tell you, Mike, that there has been a lot of discussion on Sheros. As an agency, we're working on updating some new guidance and standards and such. So that's on the agency side. As far as education materials out there on Sheros, I'm sure that there is. I think probably through our, I know that we're working with the University of North Carolina on some bike ped training and such. I bet you there's some reference material out there on Sheros. But nothing specifically comes to mind right now, Mike, as far as education materials.
Anthony, what do you want? Any other questions from anybody?
I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. If
okay.
nobody has any other questions, I suppose we can end the recording. We'll give everyone a minute or two here.
All right. Joe, I appreciate your presentation. It was good. Thank you.
All right. A little brief, but I hope it was adequate to cover what needed to be covered.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, I just wanted to add real quick to the aggressive driving definitions. I looked up in the descriptions of what those contributing causes are, and there is a slight difference between what law enforcement considers an aggressive driving crash and what we're able to determine with crash data. Crash data that comes out of a police report is a snapshot of the conditions right before or at the moment of impact. In order for something to be by law considered aggressive driving, there needs to be an observed sequence of events. You need to both be speeding while changing your lanes without using your signal in the middle of an intersection while, there's a sequence of events, and we can't really determine that based off data fields. So the best that we've been able to do is to use the contributing causes. So if someone has failed to yield the right of way, has failed to keep in the proper lane, has followed too closely, has run a red light, has ran a stop sign, has passed improperly, exceeded or posted the speed limit, disregarded other road markings, operated a motor vehicle in erratic or aggressive manner, or disregarded any other traffic signs. If any of those conditions is true for either vehicle 1 or 2, that's how we determine whether crashes are flagged as an aggressive driving crash. Those are the boxes that are available in the crash reports, and that's the best that we can do with the data that's given to us. Will boxes be added to the crash report in the future?
Probably not.
Yeah, because unfortunately, how closely, Joe, did you work with the Department of Highway Safety Motor Vehicles when they updated their crash report form?
Oh, very closely. That was back in
3 years ago now?
2000. Well, it's been on this. 2011 is when it was implemented, but there was discussions at least 2 years before that. So yeah, it went on for a long time. And when they made the changes to the crash report, they've got some national guidance, which is called the Manual for Uniform Traffic Code. No, excuse me, not the MUTCD, but the. Anyways, there's some national standards for crash reports, and so they met those criteria like 98%. So there's a lot of value added to the new crash report. So I don't anticipate any new boxes being added to the crash report to accommodate
the strategic highway safety emphasis areas.
Yeah. The acronym I was thinking about was the MUC, the Model of Uniform Crash Codes, MUCC.
So basically, the new crash report form has much more fields than the previous crash report form, and allows us to perhaps identify them better.
Yeah.
But we're still working with what we have and doing the best that we can.
That's right.
All right, well, I guess with that, we can go ahead and end the recording if there's no other questions. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I wanted to show one more thing real quick before we end, and that is the TampaBayTrafficSafety.com webpage. I believe there is a link to it on the email that you received with the link on how to log in today. That this website will have a link to the presentations that are happening. There's some info on the local traffic, on the academy, There's location here on how to log in, Genesis contact information, my contact information, and the links for all of the upcoming webinars are here. So if anybody, for whatever reason, is left out of an email blast letting you know what the login is for that day's presentation, all of the logins are here along with phone numbers that you need to call in for that. There's a calendar for that, and the presentations will be posted here. There's already a PDF of today's presentation, so if anybody would like to have a PDF of that, this is where you can download that. I will save the recording of today's webinar and put it on this site as well, and the 2013 presentations and recordings are here. So if anybody has any issues or questions with this, again, my contact info is in this spot. So with that, thank you everybody for attending, and I will end the recording now.